Welcome back, Pokemon trainers. It's been a long afternoon here at Balance Patch, but we are finally here for finals of our January challenge. So, June, you ready for this?
I'm so excited, Gabby. Not only do we have a great matchup in store, just on paper, the Pokemon,
Yeah.
but we have two phenomenal players who we're going to see here in finals. It's Kian Scion, it's Anthony Lonergan. Not only two players who have been great today, but two players who are on pretty good hot streaks coming into today, too. Anthony, multiple day twos, multiple top cuts
Yeah.
of majors in Regulation H. Kian, I can't recall the last time I saw him lose with this specific team.
Really?
Coming off his first day two at
Okay.
Toronto Regionals, and then just has been winning every single time that I've seen him play with this Zamazenta Regidrago. We can talk a little bit more about the teams, as they come up, but I'm just so excited to see how these two players approach the matchup.
Me too. And I am glad that we get to feature Anthony in particular, as I know he has made a couple of top cuts, and unfortunately we were just unable to get him on stream for those top cuts at those regionals, but it's great that we can feature our local heroes at this stage.
Absolutely. And emphasis on heroes,
Yeah.
please. The Big Tone Nation in New England is not only so strong, but we are eating well lately. We've had so much Anthony Lonergan success. We're so excited, and both these players will be taking these teams, or at least presumably variations of these teams, to the San Antonio Regional Championships.
Confirmed.
Well, I can't confirm for them. It's
Of
still a week
course.
out. There are all kinds of changes that can and will be made.
We finally see them both on stream in San Antonio, and they're running like, I don't know, YouTube.
They're both running the Terrapagos mirrors.
Yeah.
It's just completely different.
Yeah, no.
But potentially a San Antonio Regional Championship preview. Who's to say? but just so excited for these, and we got to see a lot of really cool interactions with both of these teams.
Yeah, we
the last
have.
couple of times on stream. With Anthony just now, it's the Kyogre mirror. We were talking about it in prep for this. It's a lot of those speed interactions.
Yep.
It's a lot of hoping that your Origin Pulses or your Icicle Crashes can hit. With Kian, it's the strength of Regidrago
Yeah,
that we saw.
it is. And what's interesting as well is that we've seen this Regidrago face off against Kyogre already on stream, and while it's not necessarily a favorable matchup for the Kyogre, there are still ways to play through it, and I'm very excited to see just what Anthony is going to be thinking as he faces off against Kian's Zamazenta, Amoonguss, Regidrago, Whimsicott, or Shifu Rapid Strike and Chenpao team.
Exactly. I think the big things for Kian, I don't see any natural fairy types. I don't see any dragon resists on, or I'm saying on Kian's,
yeah,
on
I was
Anthony's
say,
side.
yeah, no, that makes more sense, yeah.
Yes, on the other side of the field, we've seen Kian just click dragon moves into these Kyogre teams.
Yep.
He just played one last round in John Lyons, which of course is a different variant, has the Roaring Moon and the Electabuzz, but still a pretty Regidrago-centered game plan.
Yes.
In that you can just click Dragon Energy and Draco Meteor and trade damage very, very favorably into those teams. You also, of course, have the Wide Guard on your Zamazenta, the Terra Dragon, to resist those moves, in addition to the Terra Waters on Urshifu and Amoonguss.
Yep.
A lot of answers for that restricted Pokemon for Kian.
Yeah, but if anybody can power through those tough matchups, it is going to be Anthony, as we've seen him already take down, a very similar team in the top 4 match that we just had on stream. I also want to call out the fact that Anthony does have some options to handle those Dragon-type Pokemon in the Serena and the Chenpao. Chenpao is going to be naturally faster than the Regidrago, going to threaten some big damage if Icicle Crash can connect. And then the Serena as well does have the option to Terrastallize into an Ice-type Pokemon and then follow it up with a Triple Axle, which is a strategy we've seen a lot of people use with Kyogre for Tornadus in particular. Could be adapted to a Regidrago if it comes down to it.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of Pokemon on Kian's side that get hit super effectively by Ice-type moves, and we are potentially going to see a couple of them right here. It is the Whimsicott alongside that Urshifu for Kian, staring down the classic Tornadus and Kyogre for Anthony Lonergan.
So this is a great starting position for both of these trainers, as there is the threat of a tailwind, some speed control on the field. The Urshifu on Kian's side of the field is going to be holding safety goggles, so unlike the previous one where we saw Choice Scarf on Chris's Urshifu, this is going to be a bit slower. So as a result, even if these trainers do end up trading tailwinds, which we get one, and we're not going to see the Whimsicott, or we are going to see the Whimsicott, That's a very interesting interaction to note because traditionally Whimsicott is naturally faster than Tornadus.
Yes, and we also see now the speed interaction between the other Pokemon on the field, the Urshifu on Kian's side, moving before the Kyogre for Anthony, but also leaving the Kyogre alone to its own devices. If I know one thing about Anthony Lonergan, I'm expecting a water spout right here.
You might as well, right?
You might as well. Never stop spouting are some words I've heard him say all throughout this weekend.
Sorry, his eyes bugged out a bit.
So much damage coming from this honest splash plate Kyogre on Anthony's side.
It's honest nature now. That's a new one. I haven't heard of that. No, but I do want to see some more information about this Whimsicott in particular because, again, not that it ended up mattering in that particular turn as the Tornadus was knocked out by the Urshifu, but if we do get to a Game 2 situation, those speed interactions could be really important to keep an eye on. For now, though, we got to keep an eye on the fact that Anthony is going to terrastalize his Urshifu into that grass typing, so it will naturally resist any surging strikes from the opposing side of the field.
Yeah, the surging strikes resist. I think the other thing that's important is now it is no longer weak to those Moonblasts from this Whimsicott.
Yep.
You know, potentially not knowing, exactly how fast that Whimsicott was. Of course, we saw that the Urshifu for Anthony, the fastest thing on the field, was able to outspeed not only the Whimsicott and the Kyogre, but the other Urshifu. And now the Whimsicott sandwiched right in between those two Pokemon, and once again, it's just another full HP Water Spout from the Kyogre, picking up 2 KOs and turning Kian into his final 2 Pokemon.
And this is what's dangerous about Kyogre at the end of the day, is that if you do just decide to ignore it for a couple of turns, there's really nothing stopping it from going for a Water Spout if it is still at full health, or even an Origin Pulse would have probably been enough damage to get the 2-hit knockout on both those Pokemon. So with the wide guard knowing Zamazenta on the field now, I think we're in a bit of a different game state, and this Kyogre will most likely not be as effective against these 2 Pokemon, but the it's only a threat of wide guard. That doesn't mean that Anthony can just keep clicking it and just hope that your opponent's like, they won't Water Spout a 3rd time, right?
Yeah, exactly. But there still is that risk as the wide guard user. If you were to click the wide guard here, the Kyogre could just click an Ice Beam into what I believe we're seeing the Zamazenta going to the Terrastalize to the Dragon type.
Yep.
And if you are the wide guard Pokemon clicking wide guard, you're not doing any damage on that turn.
Yep.
You're not making any progress offensively. It becomes really difficult, especially when you're pinned into your last 2 Pokemon, to do a whole lot there as the Sucker Punch not picking up the other Urshifu on the other side.
Oh!
But this Body Press with the Sword of Ruin boost will get a 1-hit KO on the opposing Kyogre.
Yeah, well, you don't have to worry about wide guard if you could just do that for sure. And while we do see the opposing Urshifu retaliate and get a KO onto the opposing Chien-Pao, Anthony does still have the Pokemon advantage in this matchup. So I think the big question is, will this final Pokemon be able to deal super effective damage to the now Dragon-type Chien-Pao as it's actually going to get knocked out?
Yeah, it was the Life Orb Recoil.
It was the Life Orb Recoil.
On the other side, we've seen that I'd already on multiple times on stream, Pokemon surviving just at low HP and being knocked out to their own Life Orb Recoil. It is the Chien-Pao on Anthony's side, so we'll have the faster, super effective move into the Zamazenta. Not a 2-hit KO, but it does get the flinch with the Ice Field Crash, a 30% chance if that move hits to flinch. Now just playing those accuracy games.
Yeah, this Chien-Pao is going to need 3 in order to win the game for Anthony. We get 2 flinches in a row. That is unfortunate for Kian, but you can just get him out of your system in this game 1. There's still potentially 2 more games coming, and I think that knowing that Chien-Pao was the last Pokemon that Anthony had in his party in this game 1, I think you can play around that to a situation where you're not necessarily playing the will I flinch game.
Exactly. The other things that Kian was able to learn there are that Body Press with Sword of Ruin, a clean 1-hit KO on that Kyogre.
Yes, yes.
So now you're not as threatened from the Kyogre's damage output. You don't have to Terrastalize to a Dragon type there. You can save the Terrastalization. Now if the Chien-Pao is that last Pokemon, it's clicking a Sacred Sword, which even with resist, or even with ignoring the defense boosts from the the Dauntless Shield. I was trying to remember the name of the ability. It's still going to be doing less damage than the Icicle Crash, and crucially, cannot flinch.
Exactly.
You take a lot of those random elements out of that at that specific interaction. Now you just need to be able to two-hit KO this Chen Pao.
Yeah, and I think something to note is that when we saw Kian playing earlier on stream against these Kyogre teams, is there have been a few of them in the field here today. I think he very much reserved that Dragon-type Terrestrialization for Zamazenta time and time again. I hope that he learned from this matchup, like you were just saying, that that's not necessarily the win con anymore. You know, having that resistance to the water-type damage is great. I certainly do have to worry about the Urshifu on the opposing side of the field with close combat, but you have other ways you can mitigate that damage. You know, Moongus could be a potential adjustment if you're worried about that. You can play around this in a way that you do have that favorable typing in the end, and you do force your opponent to play a bit more predictably.
Exactly. That was something that Kian did very well, has done very well throughout the day, is preserving the terrestrialization.
Yes.
You know, using that later in the game, and still was able to keep it for that end game scenario down to his final 2 Pokemon. Just committed it a little bit too early there.
Yeah.
So could potentially hold on to it, could potentially make a switch up. We didn't even see the Regidrago we were talking about leading up to that first game. Another potential Pokemon that could come here. Not going to be on lead at least. It's the Chen Pao and the Zamazenta for Kian, a little bit of a switch up. And still the Tornadus and Kyogre for Anthony.
Yeah, so I think this is a great adaptation to what we saw from both trainers in Game 1 for Kian, being able to threaten the Ice-type damage immediately on the opposing Tornadus and being able to go straight for the body press into Kyogre. Unfortunately, Anthony can go for a Tailwind, and I highly doubt the Zamazenta is still going to be faster than the opposing Kyogre after that has been set up. We're also going to see Anthony lock in Terrestrialization turn 1 with that Tornadus. It's going to be turning into a Steel-type Pokemon, so not going to be taking as much damage from those Ice-type attacks either, possibly hoping to stick around for a Hurricane or two once the speed control is up on the field.
Yeah, Kyogre playing it very safe here in front of the Zamazenta that threatens Wide Guard. Going to just click Protect. No Wide Guard coming out, though. It is an Ice Spinner into the Terrestrialized Tornadus and a Body Press going into that Kyogre. Both of these players really trying to skirt around that Wide Guard Mind Game with the Hurricane as well on the Tornadus. And the 30% chance, once again, striking against Kian. That is a confusion on the Zamazenta.
It is unfortunate that Kian's running into a bit of a tough luck here, but we didn't see the Tornadus set up Tailwind that turn, so that does mean that Anthony could certainly go for it this turn and then follow it up with a Water Spout like we're saying, or he could just go on the offense, and I think that Kian is still in this game if he's able to call that correctly. And I like what he's thinking this turn, because he's essentially taking speed out of the equation. Sucker Punch to bring Kyogre down to half. That means that this Water Spout now is going to be half as powerful, and that is so important.
Yep, and we will see it is the Water Spout, Anthony, once again in the face of the Zamazenta, just clicking that attack, but a phenomenal Sucker Punch there, allowing the Zamazenta to survive that Water Spout, and provided NSYNC does not hit itself in confusion. The Body Press comes out into the Tornadus. Great use of all of the damage mitigation tactics, including doing damage yourself.
Exactly. And now that the Kyogre is down at such low health as well, this Chen Pao can keep throwing Sucker Punches in that position, and the Zamazenta is free if it chooses to worry about the Pokemon on the opposing side of the field. The unfortunate thing for Kian is that because Urshifu is the next Pokemon out on the field, you can't necessarily use Protect to stall through the turns of Tailwind that your opponent has on the field, and most likely will be taking a Pokemon loss this turn, if not two, but will be able to come in and with a potential speed control staggered, and I think that's going to be really important for the end game. This Kyogre, now that it's down to such low health, is going to be forced to rely on Ice Beam or Origin Pulse for damage, which aren't as accurate, which is going to give Kian some opportunity to get back in the game.
Yes, if, provided he can get a little bit fortunate with some of those Origin Pulse misses, there is also the opportunity, even with an Urshifu on the field, Kian could have opted for just the double Protect.
True, yeah.
You're able, of course, Urshifu will attack in front of those Protects, but you do still, if you get both Protects off, guarantee that you don't lose two Pokemon on the turn.
Exactly.
You are able to stall out one of the turns of Tailwind for Anthony's side, stagger yours with the Whimsicott on the other end, but Kian just calling the turn incredibly correctly, swapping in the Whimsicott on the Aqua Jet from the Urshifu, and protecting the Zamazenta in front of this Kyogre. Now, you preserved all of your Pokemon on the turn. You can get your own Tailwind up 2 turns later and make a lot of progress here with Zamazenta offensively into both of these Pokemon that it will be faster than once Tailwind goes up.
Exactly, and that definitely works to Kian's benefit, and I think it's great that Whimsicott was able to hold on with so much health as well, because looking at this Whimsicott set, it can threaten with Tailwind this turn, almost has to go for Tailwind this turn, but in the following turns it can use Encore or Moonblast, which is going to be doing some significant damage to the final 2 Pokemon that Anthony has from field, as they're both weak to that Fairy typing.
Yet, thankfully, Zamazenta never hitting itself in confusion, gets the wide guard off, won't be the most impactful in front of 2 physical attackers with no spread moves, and Urshifu does just click Aqua Jet in order to pick up that last KO, that last little bit of damage onto the Zamazenta, but leaving the Whimsicott free to just click Encore. That would have been into the Kyogre, locking it into the Water Spout for those wide guards, with just going to be the Chien-Pao. But because Whimsicott didn't take any damage, now allows you to stagger the Tailwind by 3 turns.
Exactly. So not exactly the outcome that Kian was hoping for, but certainly favorable in the end. I think the other thing to keep in mind here is that Kian is still in a bit of a tough position, as they have to break the Focus Sash on the Chien-Pao. It's not like a single Moonblast is going to be enough. And with Whimsicott actually going for an Encore into the opposing Urshifu, this will give it the opportunity to go for a Aqua Jet again. The big question is, though, when does this damage start adding up?
Yeah, the Aqua Jets from the other Urshifu, I like the Encore play because it means that your Urshifu is not under any threat from the opposing Urshifu. That still is, it's a sort of Ruin boosted, Rain boosted, Life Orb boosted, same type attack bonus, throw that in there. Boosted, 40 base power move still is going to add up in damage. And, when you're down to the 2v2 here in this endgame, your Chien-Pao only has 1 hit point left. That is going to be absolute fodder for the opposing Urshifu to click Aqua Jet into. Yes, you can at least get a Sucker Punch off this turn to act before that Urshifu is able to knock you out. But it really comes down to that speed interaction between Kian's Urshifu and the opposing Kyogre, which we have confirmed in Game 1, Kian's Urshifu will move first.
Yeah, so it's really going to come down to the mind games present here, as both these trainers are down to their final 2 Pokemon, with that Chien-Pao having just that 1 HP, and this Kyogre and the Urshifu really, I think, setting the pace for Anthony.
Yeah, for Kian, I think the safest play here, of course, is to just Sucker Punch into that Urshifu. You get some guaranteed damage. It's Encored still into the Aqua Jet. And because Kyogre cannot protect in front of this Unseen Fist Urshifu, you're able to just guarantee that you should knock that Pokemon out with a close combat here. And if Kian is able to pick up this KO onto the Kyogre, there should be 1 more turn of Encore after this one for that Urshifu locked into Aqua Jet, which allows that last close combat just to come right through and should send us to a Game 3.
Yeah, this Urshifu does still have plenty of health on Kian's side of the field, so even though it is taking the defensive drops from that close combat, and of course there's the Life Orb and the Rain and all that stuff up on the field for the opposing Urshifu, the odds of this Aqua Jet knocking out could have been there, except that was the critical hit. So Anthony just unfortunately falling just a little bit short, as we will be going into Game 3 here.
Yeah, it's such a creative way to get through that for Kian's side.
Yeah.
Found a way to win that contest, bringing your Tailwind setter in the back, and then never clicking Tailwind. You got to stall out the opposing Tailwind with an Urshifu and still find your way through with a pretty solid endgame there, encoring into the Aqua Jet and just picking up your own KOs with your own Urshifu.
Yeah, that's what I really like about Whimsicott in Regulation G in particular, is that the threat of Encore with so much damage on the field from all these heavy hitters, you can always have that option to lock your opponent into a move, assuming they're not a dark type or there's no sort of priority blocking active on the field. And you just have to be so careful, because there are situations like this where you may think you have the game locked up, but then you just click the wrong move and Whimsicott's there to punish that. Going into game number 3, I would love to see Kian continue the strategy of having the Whimsicott in the back, threatening that later game speed control and also the later game board control that it brings. But I do think you have to be a little bit careful with how you start at the beginning, because while the Zamazenta was able to do what it needed to do, a couple of different damage rolls and we would have had a very different game.
Yes, and even a couple of different calls on those turns.
Exactly,
If the Kyogre doesn't protect on turn 1, but instead decides to attack, throws an Ice Beam to break the Focus Sash for Chen Pao, or just gets some damage off into the Zamazenta, it's a very, very different ball game.
Yep.
But I did really like seeing at least the Chen Pao early. That puts on just a lot of very specific pressure onto Anthony's team. It specifically in Game 2, forced the Tornadus to Terrastalize.
Yes.
And if Anthony is forced to Terrastalize early, then Kian is able to play the game so much more safely there in the end, because he knows that nothing can change types.
Yeah. Well, we are going to be seeing a run back of Game 2 leads for Anthony with Kyogre and Tornadus, and Kian going all the way back to Game 1 with that Whimsicott and Urshifu combination.
Yeah, we do know the speed interactions between all of these teams.
Yep.
The, assuming no speed ties, should be Tornadus, Whimsicott, Urshifu, Kyogre.
Yep.
But I would be surprised if we saw the exact same things play out, just because of how much damage Kian had to absorb on his side.
Yep.
And to be fair, Anthony just clicking Water Spout, I don't think Kian's going to let that happen again.
You think, but then you have to wonder, well, how do I stop that? How do I mitigate that? And looking at the Whimsicott and the Urshifu together, Whimsicott has to go for Tailwind in that situation, otherwise you are going to be slower. And then Urshifu, it can deal some damage, and certainly this Terrastalization into the water typing is going to help boost that damage. But how much is it realistically going to do to the opposing Kyogre?
Yeah, it is just going to be a Tailwind straight away for the Tornadus on Anthony's side. Just playing the game completely up and down. And it's a light screen for Kian.
Interesting. That'll do it.
Yeah, able to mitigate some of the damage from this Water Spout. As it comes through, still over half to both of these Pokemon. Shockingly, those are resisted attacks. And the Surging Strikes comes out into this Tornadus. I don't know if he needed the Water Terrastalization in order to guarantee that KO. We saw it in Game 1, that it just picked up just with the rain. But in case the Tornadus switches to something else, in case it's a Hurricane into that slot,
exactly,
you just save the Urshifu for sure that turn. And now you have an opportunity to get your Tailwind up this turn later.
You do still have to worry about just how much damage this opposing Kyogre is going to put out onto the field, as it does look like another full health Water Spout will be enough to pick up the double knockout here. But I think the goal from this turn was to have whoever is in the back for Kian benefit from that light screen, benefit from not having to worry about the Kyogre as much. Now that the Urshifu is on the field for Anthony, I think you do have to make a very tough decision here on which Pokemon you want to focus in on. And given that we see the Tailwind match from Kian, we're going to have to see if this Urshifu on his side of the field is going to be able to hold on to even attack, as that is going to be KO onto that Pokemon. So now Kyogre, once again, unthreatened, full health Water Spout in the rain.
Yeah, likely just going to see it come through once again. It could even be an Ice Beam, just in case, but Anthony, knowing that his Urshifu, we saw did move before Kian's earlier in the set.
Yep.
Gets a pretty free, it is just going to be Ice Beam though. Either way, a pretty free attack for the Kyogre into the Whimsicott. And now Kian once again down to his final two Pokemon, staring down the Urshifu and the Kyogre on the other side.
It's unfortunate that it's the Zamazenta and Chen Pao back on the field for Kian as well, as this Urshifu is in a really good spot for Anthony. On the one hand, if you're in Kian's shoes, you want to stop the Urshifu from threatening you, as it can break through your protects. But if you focus too much in on the Urshifu, now all of a sudden the Kyogre is just still there, still vibing. And if you try and wide guard to maybe stop the Kyogre from doing its thing, well, realistically speaking, what can Chen Pao do against this Pokemon? I think Anthony very correctly called going into this matchup that these two Pokemon were going to be the key of his strategy, and by allowing them to exist together at this point in time, while he does lose the Urshifu thanks to the double up, here comes the Water Spout.
Yeah, and with the light screen, still does so much damage to this Zamazenta.
Yep.
Kian feeling forced to double target into that Urshifu, not quite certain if the body press with Sword of Ruin would be able to pick up the Urshifu on the other side.
Yep.
So no damage onto the Kyogre still, and now you're in this position where it's Chien-Pao once again as the final Pokemon for Anthony, and such low health on Kian's side, it's going to be very, very difficult to weave your way through that Focus Sash, and you have to keep saying it, the immense amounts of damage that the opposing Kyogre is able to put out.
Yeah, if there is some way for Kian to find the opportunity to break the opposing Chien-Pao's Focus Sash, and then, you know, once the Chien-Pao is out of the way, focusing on the Kyogre, we know that the Zamazenta is faster. We know that that body press will pick up the knockout at that point in time. It's just unfortunate that because Kyogre's partners have been so powerful, Kian just hasn't really had the opportunity to pivot towards that endgame.
Yeah, we are just going to see a double protect from Kian's side. No protects coming out for Anthony, as it's just the Terra Stellar Sacred Sword going into the Zamazenta and an Ice Beam followed up onto that Chien-Pao. This, I believe, was the last turn of Tailwind for Anthony's side. A good, very, very good double protect for Kian to stall that out. Now you're in this position where you're able at least to threaten the one-hit KO onto the opposing Kyogre. The Chien-Pao protects, though, preserving its Focus Sash, preserving any damage, and the opposing Kyogre also just going to protect to try to stall out Kian's Tailwind as well.
I think the win condition here for Anthony is almost what it was the previous turn for Kian, and that's just try to remove the opposing speed control and then hope that your Chien-Pao is going to be the faster one. Rain coming off the field is also nice, but with the removal of Light Screen as well, I think that approximately balances out in terms of the damage potential. And realistically here, we're not necessarily looking at damage rolls, at least for Kian's Pokemon on the field. We're just looking at attack order. And what realistically needs to happen here is that Kian needs to land 2 attacks in the opposing Chien-Pao and then somehow have that Zamazenta around to pick up the Kyogre in the next turn.
Yeah, it's just that numbers game. You need 2 attacks for the Chien-Pao, you need 1 attack for the opposing Kyogre, and I don't think you're going to be able to survive even 2 attacks from the other side, as this Terra Stellar Sacred Sword is enough to pick up the Zamazenta there, and this Kyogre, assuming it clicked a 100% accurate move,
it did.
Fittingly, one more full health Water Spout from this Kyogre to clean up the game for Anthony and give him the win here at the Balance Patch League Challenge.
So congratulations to Anthony. I think that's a really fun take on the Kyogre archetype that we've been seeing pop up left and right. I also really like how Kian was able to run that Zamazenta team with the Regidrago and kind of put his own spin on it, even though we didn't see that in this matchup. But I'm certain we'll be seeing more from these trainers in the future here in the local scene.
Certainly, I would hope so. You know, the way we were talking to them up before the set. And I would argue, I think it delivered. You know,
I think it did, yeah.
That was very, very fun the entire way through. A lot of damage trades, a lot of big damage coming out from both sides, some one-hit KOs. Just Anthony putting a little bit more pressure on the gas. Just clicking Water Spout. I've heard him say never stop spouting all weekend, and I think that holds true here today. The amount of times he clicked it just in that set.
For sure. Well, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you to Balance Patch for having us. Thank you for all the staff who made this event possible. I think that's it for us. They're probably going to kick us out soon. I'm going to be real. So thanks for watching. We'll be back in February for more, presumably. Yeah.
Correct.